Hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on MisplacedStraws.com, where music comes to life. And my guest today is truly one of my biggest inspirations. He's one of the great lyricists and frontmen, not just in progressive music, but in music in general. His band Marillion is about to release their 20th studio record, just a beautiful piece of work called An Hour Before It's Dark. Please welcome H himself, Mr. Steve Hogarth. Welcome.
Hello. Good morning. Good heavens.
Well, there are certain records that just kind of transcend a simple musical release and kind of reflect life in the world. And this is one of them. The title, An Hour Before It's Dark, it's a striking phrase, and it's used in a couple different ways throughout the record. Was that a phrase that struck you, and how did it come to play such a big role in what you were writing for the record?
Well, it was almost an accident, to be honest. We were working on what turned out to be the first song on the album, Be Hard on Yourself. And what I was trying to say in that song really was, look, we've got a climate crisis, we've got a planet in crisis, we've got a mass extinction, and we all know we're going to do something about it, and we all know we've got to do something about it, but none of us is doing anything about it. We wake up in the morning and the first thing we think isn't, what am I going to do about the planet, for God's sake? Mm-hmm. We think of other stuff, and this is urgent. And it is an existential problem for mankind. And if we don't do something about saving the planet will sort it out itself. Mm-hmm. And that'll be ugly. And I think the pandemic that we've all just suffered is one of what is going to be many harbingers of the planet's final solution for us. That's probably that choice of words is in bad taste, but I think there is a very good chance that the planet is going to have to reduce our numbers because there's too many of us, and that's the fundamental problem. And everything we're thinking and talking about doing to be kinder to the planet is all well and good, but the fundamental problem is that there's far too many human beings on it now, living at odds with nature. And so Be Hard on Yourself was really just a message to me as much as everyone else. I'm looking in the mirror singing this song to some extent. You've been spoiled for years. You're going to have to learn to live with less and to live slightly less comfortably than you have been doing, and to try and get out of this addiction to the next shiny thing, that makes you somehow a better person. Oh, I've got the latest iPhone. Oh, I've got the latest this. Oh, I've moved on to that. I'm an early adopter. That's all got to go because it's killing everything. So we need to have a fundamental rethink. So to come back to your question, I was basic. That was the tree I was barking up with that song. And we got to the very end of the song, and it was calming back down again until we had the idea to return this, as we often do actually, to return the song at the end to whatever started it. And it started with this sort of floating pastoral little piece of music before the rhythm kicks in. So we returned it to that. And as we returned it to that, I was singing on the mic, and I just sang, paint a picture, sing a song, plant some flowers in the park, get out and make it better. You've got an hour before it's dark. And that came from that feeling that we shouldn't. I had a whole load of other lines for that song. I've got this line about throwing the television through the window of the pub. thereby destroying the two things that are wasting all your time in one movement. But it wasn't very poetic, and it didn't really work as a piece of poetry. It was a bit too coarse. But it was a second attempt to try and say that, don't sit down on your fat ass and watch the television. Go out and try and make the world better somehow, more beautiful. Do something positive. When I was a little boy, my mom would say to me, I'd go out playing and she'd say, "You've got an hour before it's dark, and I want you back in."
Yeah.
So that was a sort of a thing that came from my childhood, and it went on the end of the song. And then I sent all the lyrics to Simon Ward, who designs our record covers. And I sent him lots of lyric snippets as well as possible titles for the album. And he came back to me, he rejected them all, and he came back to me and said, "What about an hour before it's dark?" That very last little bit that you put on "Be Hard on Yourself." And I thought, well, that's actually, there's a lot to that in terms of what this album is about, because this album is about being out of time or running out of time or being in that 5 minutes to midnight cliche. So it seemed to be a good title. That's really where it came from.
And Be Hard on Yourself is one of 4 suites that make up the bulk of the record. And before we get into those themselves, let's talk a little bit about that structure. With your last record, Fear, you guys use the same thing, these longer multi-part suites to make up most of the record. As a storyteller, do you find that these suite type songs give you more of a canvas to work with than writing in what was a traditional type of song that Marillion worked in for so long?
We found over the years that ideas, we quite often start with what people everybody goes, do you start with words or do you start with music? What comes first, what comes first? And in our case, it's usually words. And I turn up to the writing sessions with my laptop full of words. Some are new, some go back years because they never got used. And while the band is jamming, I'm sitting on a mic casting around for whatever I think would feel right with the music that's being played. And I will be trying to sing those words on the jams. And that's how we write. And we record all of it. Then we leave it alone for a while. Then we listen to it all. And then we throw nearly all of it away. And then we save those little moments in maybe 10 seconds in each hour where we all go, hang on a minute, what happened then? That was really interesting. And we snip those out, and they go to the next stage of the distillation process. And we begin looking at those again. We learn how to play them. Because we're jamming, we don't know how we played them, so we have to learn them. And then we take it from there. Now, sometimes the words that we're using are part of something, a thought process which is very long. And sometimes it's barely more than a handful of words. And so the ultimate lengths of the songs are really more to do with what naturally develops from the thought process than out of any feeling that we are obliged for a song to be this long, this short, have this many time signatures in it, change key 10 times. All those things associated with progressive rock, they're things that we've done, but we've never done them because we feel we should. We've done them because they felt like the right thing to do for the song in that moment. And perhaps even more, they felt like the right thing to do for the words. when we wrote This Strange Engine, for instance, I'd got all those words. I'd got all of that from word go. And so really the band were challenged to write a piece of music that was long enough to get them all in. So sometimes that happens. And then sometimes another example would be from this album, Murder Machines. I might just have a handful of words, Murder Machines, Fragments of Life. And then I put my arms around her and I killed her with love, because it occurred to me during the pandemic that when you embrace someone, you risk killing them. And that was so very, very strange and very at odds with our nature, that we had to start thinking about those things. I guess it's, to some extent, it's probably the same terror that the gay community had in the 80s when AIDS first struck, where suddenly to get close to another human being physically could be a death sentence. That's weird. And it's very difficult to cope with. So Murder Machines came out of those two thoughts, really. Initially, the idea that the virus itself was a machine, because it's not a living thing. It's a piece of DNA. It can't think. So you could argue that it's some kind of machine on a mission to take over an organism and kill it. So that was really where that came from. But then once I got on to thinking about Murder Machines, sometimes you can say an awful lot with not a lot of words, because you can actually have 2 or 3 meanings running in parallel. And we've done that a lot as well. My favorite lyrics are the ones where I know that they mean 3 things. That I find that that probably just makes me feel clever. But I do like that, if something, there's the obvious meaning and then there's a metaphor running beneath it, and then there's maybe a third metaphor running beneath that one. They're the most satisfying things. And so quite often when I'm working on words, I'll get to a point in a lyric where I'll think, well, this could also mean this. And because that then occurs to me, that will affect the rest of the lyric. I will then alter the rest of the lyric to keep that double meaning running. To entertain myself or whatever, or it becomes like a game. And in Murder Machines, what started out as a very straightforward lyric about a virus and the terror of not being able to hug the people you love, then I started to think, well, a chorus like I wrapped my arms around her and killed her with love can mean quite a few different things. It can refer to unrequited love. It can refer to how we can kill somebody with affection if we then withdraw that affection, and how love can become tortuous. And so I then started to think, well, then maybe we are the murder machines, and maybe we have that capacity to kill with love. So I had those 2 lines of thought running. But what I was trying to say really was that Murder Machines is what, it's only 3 minutes 50 long or whatever it is. That sort of feels like the right length for that message. Whereas other things we've done, that Levers from the last album might be a good example, I had so much to say about what we are, these people who arrive and create a show and then leave and go somewhere else and do that all again. And how the process of constantly waving goodbye to people is corrosive to the soul, and it's exhausting after a while. And the whole idea of being a circus person and somebody who constantly leaves everything behind. So, you know, the idea of the leavers and the remainers who remain whilst the leavers go. I had a lot to say, so that ended up being a long song.
And we talked about fear, and that record, it was just really heavy record. And as you transform into this record, again, you're dealing with some heavy subjects with the environment and with the pandemic and AIDS and things like that. But I think with this record, the end of each of these suites gives a little bit of hope, even if it's just sort of the angel section at the end of Care that praises the caregivers and the frontline workers who have been taking care of all of us through this. Was it important to you, after putting such heavy messages in some of those suites, to sort of end it with, but there's still hope? You still have that hour.
Yeah, maybe. I think certainly musically, this album is kind of redolent with, it's more uplifting, despite my doomy words. You know, as I say, I mean, Be Hard on Yourself is a good example because it's got this really heavy message. And then at the very end, it almost ends like something from Peanuts or something, you know, plant some flowers in the park, you know, paint a picture, sing a song. So it kind of goes airy fairy and light in the last minute. You know, it appeals to the better angels after all of that. So perhaps you've got a point. Maybe even in the lyrics, there is that. I mean, Sierra Leone is a song about dignity and about a poor man who's never had any control over his life because he's poor, who suddenly finds himself in possession of this priceless diamond that's as big as his hand. And he refuses to sell it because for the first time in his life, he can refuse to do something. You know, he can impose his own will on his destiny. And he's lying on this white beach, because Sierra Leone is famous for its white beaches. He's lying on a white beach, listening to the children playing. And he's looking at the sky through this diamond. And he's thinking, I'm not going to sell this because it's changed me. It's changed my life. And I have more power by withholding it than I would have if I sold it. So it's a little bit about selling out or not selling out, and it's about dignity. And that's certainly not a depressing notion. It's a beautiful notion, and that's a hopeful notion. And as you pointed out, the end of Care is, I mean, it's so beautifully uplifting because of it's got that thing where all the elements arrived eventually together. You know, the brilliance of the band and the choice of chord changes in the end, and the you know, Pete's choice of the bass notes and where it's going to go, and how that mantra that's just going around, the angels in this world are not in the walls of churches, and the music is growing all the time underneath it. I'm singing the same thing, you know, but the music is opening out like a flower underneath it. And that's the brilliance of the musicians. And when we're at our best, we've got that chemistry together where I can hold down a thought process that they can enfold and work with. And then, of course, we were fortunate during this album to discover the Choir Noir, which is an amazing choir. And so then the choirs pile in, and the whole thing, it becomes like a hymn. It becomes a church itself by the end. And so we've closed the album with a thank you to everybody, as you say, the caregivers, everybody who looked after all of us during these difficult couple of years. Some of whom gave their lives, of course, because a great many care workers died themselves in the early stages of the pandemic, before there were vaccines and before the protective equipment was fully understood, before the way that the virus was transmitting was really fully understood. There was just that feeling, wasn't there? Like, dare I touch this? Is it here? Mm-hmm. Is it on here? You know, where is it? You know, how can I not catch it? People were lying under ultraviolet lights. I mean, Mark Kelly was announced that he'd been lying under ultraviolet lights one day, you know, because he thought that would save him. So, you know, nobody knew. Everybody was like, what the hell? What do we do? And of course, people were dying before it was really fully understood what we should do. So I wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to carve it literally in stone, you know, and put it out on record forever. Those are the people. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're just bloody rock musicians, but those are the people. I mean, this whole notion of a hall of fame with people like bloody Billy Joel and Jeff Beck in it. They're not the heroes in this world, you know. They're just guys having a good time, for the most part.
And kind of changing gears a little bit, I think we need to talk about the fans of this band. You know, back in the 90s, you guys pretty much created the concept of crowdfunding, and not just with records, but with a whole US tour. And more recently, when you guys went out in the fall, your fans stepped up to help cover some of the insurance costs through a funding campaign. Does it ever surprise you that your music means so much to so many people around the world that they would step up and help at, you know, a whim? And, you know, as soon as you announce something, everybody is there to help you because of what your music means to them.
The surprise came back in the late 90s. I think it was 97 or something. And it was you Americans that started it. There was a couple of guys called Jeff. One opened a bank account and the other one put a message up on an internet website. It had nothing to do with us. The first I knew about it, they'd already raised $20,000, and that was me finding out. And I'm the singer in the band. So so that was the surprise. Was, what are these people doing? They've created a fund for us to go and play in the USA. And so then we, having discovered it, we kind of got behind it, and we said, well, you know, if anyone contributes to this fund and we end up making this tour, then we will record one of the shows and you'll get it for free. You know, we'll make a CD and we'll send that to you by way.
I still have mine, by the way.
There you go. Yeah. So you invented crowdfunding. I mean, I'd like to take the credit, but it's really not fair, because the truth is, it was dropped in our lap by the faithful. And that was a shock. You know, when I first found out, oh, these two guys have got $20,000 in the bank, it was like, what? What? How? Why? And that was the point at which we all woke up to the fact that, you know, we had occasionally got letters from people saying, you know, your music has been the soundtrack to my life. Your music has saved my life. People have looked me in the eye and said that to me. I never know what to say back, because nothing seems like, what do you say to that when somebody says that to you? It's very hard to come up with an appropriate response other than maybe a hug. There's nothing you could say in words. But although people had occasionally written letters like that, I don't think we fully realized how widespread the feeling was until then. So that was something that we learned back in '97. And we also learned that whatever this internet thing is, we better get on it because it's the future. And so they were the two lessons. And if I can give ourselves any credit at all, it was just the credit for being smart enough to recognize the value of what had been dropped into our laps, instead of brushing it off. You know, we could see that it was something extraordinary and we'd better learn from it and we'd better run with it. And so all the idea to crowdfund the next album, which I think was Anorachnophobia. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that right? I get them all mixed up. Then everything got easier because we arrived at a place where we could email the fans. So before email, we never could have done it. But once email existed, you could send a question to 20,000 people and say, hey, we're thinking of doing this. What do you think of that? You know, is that something you would be into or not? If you're into it, reply to yes at Marillion.com. And if you're not into it, reply to no at Marillion.com. Then we don't have to read the emails. We just have to count them. And so we did that. And, you know, the response was overwhelmingly positive, which again surprised us. But it wasn't that we were emboldened to go ahead with it. It was that we knew it would succeed before we started it then. And so we crowdfunded the album and it set us free. We didn't need any more record labels. We only needed record labels in the sense that once the album was finished, we could give it to them as a finished product and say, hey, put that in the shops, it'll make you money. And they're not going to argue with that. You know, there was no need for an A&R man to stroke his beard and say, oh, maybe if it was a bit faster or if it was a bit shorter, or if the snare drum was a bit louder, you know, or if you'd got a couple more tracks for radio. We don't have any of that to deal with anymore. We just have the art, you know, and we just do what excites us. And that's the end of it. We really don't give a damn about any other aspect of anything. And people ask me sometimes about the music business, and my reaction is always, we've got nothing to do with the music business. I don't know a damn thing about the music business, and I don't want anything to do with it. That's kind of, I've been in the music business for 40 years and I still haven't got a clue how it works. It makes no sense to me.
You made your own, that's for sure.
Well, someone had to.
Mentioned that you did the tour in the fall. Now that the record's coming out on March 4th, have you been able to find pockets where you will be able to tour? And of course, the $1 million question, will we get to see you in the US at any time coming up?
The only plan we've got to get over there is we're going to appear on Cruise to the Edge in May, which sets sail out of Orlando. We're doing those shows, and then we've a definite plan to play a Marillion weekend in Montreal.
Mhm.
But as for the US of A, there's nothing in place yet. The obstacles that are placed in our way by your government with all of these visas and work permits and things makes it very difficult. And whenever we've toured in America, I know some of the people involved in setting it up have vowed never to do it again because it's just so hard to do. I mean, it's all right for us, but Lucy just about went out of her mind, just jumping through all the hoops to get us the visas and whatnot. So it is difficult at the moment for us to come to the USA, but let's see how the record does.
Mhm. Well, and again, the record is called An Hour Before It's Dark. The band, of course, my favorite band ever in existence, Marillion. We've been spending some time here with lead vocalist Steve Hogarth. It's out everywhere March 4th. There's all kinds of vinyl and colored vinyl and CDs and streaming and everything else. Steve, it's a great record. It's been a pleasure getting to talk to you, and I hope we get to do this again sometime.
I look forward to it.
Yep.
Thank you for your time, man.
Thank you.